Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here. So those of you who have been following my channel will know that recently I've been reviewing several X-Men video games. Since I'm pretty much done with that for the time being, I figured I would do a top 10 list since I enjoy doing these types of videos from time to time. Before I get started, let me make it clear that this is all based purely on my own personal opinion, and it's of course entirely subjective. I would love to see your list of the best X-Men games in the comment section if you disagree. I reviewed every single game on this list individually, for anybody who's interested, link in description. So here we go, my top 10 X-Men video games, let's get started. Number 10, XMen Destiny, released in 2011, developed by Silicon Knights. So just making it onto the list, we have the most recent X-Men game to be released. As I said in my review, this game is essentially a repetitive button masher, with some bare-bones RPG elements, from the developers of the massively disappointing game Too Human from 2008, which I also reviewed a while back, link in description. I don't have much else to say about Destiny. It's about as generic and repetitive as an action-adventure game can get, and its RPG elements leave a lot to be desired. The game does have an interesting leveling up system, as well as a New Game Plus mode, and some interesting bonus features. But for the most part the game is just a chore to play, and it has very little to offer when compared to other games of its kind. Number 9, X-Men Next Dimension, released in 2002, developed by Midway Studios. So this is one of the later fighting games in the X-Men series, and it's the third and final game of the excellent Mutant Academy series, as well as being the first to be released on the 6th generation of consoles. The game has a huge roster, as well as a great visual style and aesthetic. But compared to the other games in the Mutant Academy series, its controls are very stiff and clunky. The game also has extremely unfair difficulty spikes here and there in the story mode, and it's just not quite as fun as the other X-Men fighting games for me. Number 8, X-Men Children of the Atom, released in 1994, developed by Capcom. So this is a classic mid-90s arcade fighter that was later ported onto the PS1, which is the version I reviewed. It's a game that's aged pretty poorly, but for its time it was a masterpiece, and it's one of the best fighting games from that era. It has an interesting roster, as well as great graphics and presentation for the time, and it has some pretty fun, fast-paced combat and gameplay. This is a game that pretty much paved the way for the later X-Men fighting games to be what they were, though the game itself is very limited, lacking in a lot of the features that we've come to expect from modern day fighting games. But this is mostly due to the technical limitations of the time. As I said, for its time the game is great. Number 7, X-Men Mutant Academy, released in the year 2000, developed by Midway Studios. So the first Mutant Academy game was actually released as a tie-in for the first X-Men movie that came out alongside it, and it's a pretty badass fighting game, just like Children of the Atom. It has some great fast-paced gameplay and is a lot of fun. It also has an interesting roster, and some incredible combat mechanics. The graphics and presentation are pretty good for the time, and it has some interesting bonus features, including some cool alternative costumes, some of which are from the movie, as well as a gallery where you get some artwork and even some promotional material such as a movie trailer. It's a great fighting game for the most part, with plenty of replay value and plenty of features. Number 6, X2 Wolverines Revenge, released in 2003, developed by Gene Pool Software. So this is where the X-Men games start to get awesome. Wolverines Revenge is a great third-person action-adventure game, with some great combat, some interesting stealth mechanics, and plenty of level and location variety. It's a game that is very challenging, but not impossible, and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience to play, which might put some modern day gamers off, but me personally, I really had fun with it. It's not a perfect game, but it has an original story that is very interesting, as well as some great voice acting, and the combat of the game is quite good too. It's surprisingly nuanced, and the game has a ton of bonus features. Just like Mutant Academy, the game is technically a movie tie-in, being released alongside the movie X-Men 2, but it has nothing to do with the movie's story or continuity, with the developers choosing instead to bring us an original story. I really enjoyed it, and I actually think the game is a bit underrated, since it rarely gets talked about nowadays. Number 5, X-Men The Official Game, released in 2006, developed by Underground Development. So this is another X-Men movie tie-in, being released alongside the movie X-Men 3. and another one that doesn't follow the movie's story. Though unlike the previous two, this one actually takes place in the movie's continuity, taking place between X-Men 2 and X-Men 3, though it's unclear whether or not the game is canon. The game is a pretty awesome third-person action-adventure game, which allows you to play as 3 different characters, Wolverine, Iceman and Nightcrawler, with all 3 of them feeling very different from one another. The game is awesome in my personal opinion, and very underrated. The combat is great, the level design is great, and it's just an absolute blast to play. I'd recommend it to any X-Men fan, and anybody who likes action-adventure games. Number 4, X-Men Mutant Academy 2, released in 2001, once again developed by Midway Studios. So just like the first Mutant Academy game, this game is a solid fighting game, with basically everything the first game had to offer minus the bonus features that tied in with the movie. And it added so much more, with a much larger and more interesting roster, a bigger and better game than the first in just about every way I can think of. The game also has less technical issues than the first, and just runs better overall. A classic. Number 3, X-Men Origins Wolverine, released in 2009, developed by Raven Software. So this is another movie license game, and unlike the previous X-Men movie tie-ins, this one actually follows the story of the movie. And not only that, but the game is actually considerably better than the movie it's based on, which is rare. The combat of the game is fast-paced. The game is also extremely graphic and absolutely brutal. Some of the best hack-and-slash style combat I've ever seen in a video game. It's a game that is incredibly addictive and incredibly fun. It also has a ton of replay value, with a great leveling up system and several bonus features, such as unlockable costumes. The game also has some fantastic graphics and presentation for the time, and some truly epic boss battles. A criminally underrated game that I think got shafted by a lot of gamers and critics purely based on the fact that it was a movie license game. I personally think this game is better than most linear hack and slash games of its kind, and was way ahead of its time, in terms of technicalities too. Number 2, X-Men Legends 2 Rise of Apocalypse, released in 2005, once again developed by Raven Software. This game is a classic RPG with an original story based on the X-Men comics, sequel to the legendary X-Men Legends that came out the previous year. So just like the first game, this game has a huge roster of playable characters to choose from, who all feel very different from one another, with a great leveling up system and some fantastic RPG mechanics. It has a massive amount of enemy variety, as well as level and location variety, and it's just a game that is jam-packed full of content. It also has some interesting bonus features, and even a New Game Plus mode, where you can take all your unlocks and upgrades, as well as your level ups to start the game again. It has some badass boss battles and looks great for its time, and it also has a very interesting story. A great game. Number 1, X-Men Legends, released in 2004, once again developed by Raven Software. So it was a tough call between the 2 X-Men Legends games, since both of them are masterpieces in my personal opinion, and for me it was very difficult to rate one over the other. But for me, despite all the slight improvements that were made in the sequel, such as adding a New Game Plus mode, and adding more options to the leveling up system, I still personally prefer this game. Mostly because I think the story was a lot better, and a lot more interesting, and I also think the boss battles and overall level design was a lot better too. Just like the sequel, the game has some amazing RPG elements, as well as a lot of replay value. It's an absolute blast to play, one of my personal favourite games of all time, and definitely my favourite X-Men game. So there you have it, my top 10 personal favourite X-Men games. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I would love to read your list in the comment section. Also, I will leave a link to my X-Men review series playlist in the description section to this video, for anybody who's interested. Stay tuned for more retrospective video game reviews. I have a lot of reviews coming to the channel in the near future, as well as more top 10 lists, so stay tuned for those. Thanks for watching and God bless.